The Whispering Woods. There's a forest in the outskirts of a small town in Maine known as the Whispering Woods. Locals believe the woods are haunted, but no one knows why. I heard the whispers myself one cold, foggy night. It was like the trees were alive, breathing and whispering secrets of a dark past. I had just moved to the town for a new job and rented a small cabin near the woods. My neighbors warned me not to venture into the forest after dark. Curiosity got the better of me, and one evening, I decided to take a walk along the forest path. The deeper I went, the quieter it became, until all I could hear were the whispers. The whispers were indistinct at first, but then they grew clearer, calling my name. My heart pounded as I quickened my pace, hoping to find a way out. Instead, I stumbled upon an old, abandoned house deep within the woods. It looked like it had been there for centuries, with ivy growing over its crumbling walls. Compelled by an unseen force, I approached the house. The whispers grew louder and more insistent. I pushed the creaking door open and stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and the smell of decay. As I explored the house, I found old photographs of a family, their faces scratched out. In the attic, I discovered a diary belonging to a young girl named Emily. She wrote about the dark rituals her family performed and how they summoned something evil. Emily's last entry spoke of the entity taking her family one by one, whispering their names before dragging them into the darkness. As I read the final words, the whispers surrounded me. I could feel a cold breath on the back of my neck. Turning slowly, I saw a shadowy figure standing in the corner, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The whispers grew deafening, and I felt a hand on my shoulder. I bolted out of the house, running through the woods as the whispers followed me. When I finally burst out of the trees and into the open, the whispers ceased. I never went back into the Whispering Woods, and I left the town shortly after. But even now, I can still hear the whispers in my dreams, calling my name. The Abandoned Asylum. There's an abandoned asylum on the outskirts of a city, long forgotten and left to decay. Stories say the place is haunted by the spirits of the patients who suffered there. I was part of a group of urban explorers who decided to spend a night in the asylum, armed with cameras and a sense of adventure. We entered the asylum at dusk, the air thick with the smell of mold and rot. The walls were covered in graffiti, and broken furniture littered the hallways. As night fell, the atmosphere grew oppressive. We set up our equipment and began our exploration. In the surgical wing, we found old operating tables and rusted medical tools. The air was heavy with a sense of dread. As we ventured deeper, strange things started happening. Our flashlights flickered, and we heard whispers echoing through the empty halls. One of our group members, Sarah, claimed she saw a figure in a white gown standing at the end of a hallway. We all rushed to see, but there was nothing there. The more we explored, the more unnerved we became. Doors slammed shut on their own, and we heard footsteps following us. In one of the patient rooms, we found old journals and drawings depicting horrific scenes of torture and despair. The drawings were childlike, but the content was deeply disturbing. As we read through the journals, the temperature in the room dropped suddenly, and we saw our breath misting in the air. Out of nowhere, the building seemed to come alive. We heard screams and the sound of metal scraping against metal. The whispers grew louder, and shadows moved in the corners of our vision. Panic set in, and we decided to leave. As we made our way to the exit, we realized we were not alone. The spirits of the patients seemed to follow us, their faces twisted in agony. We ran, stumbling over debris and trying to find our way out. Just as we reached the door, it slammed shut, trapping us inside. The spirits surrounded us, their eyes filled with sorrow and rage. We screamed for help, but no one could hear us. The last thing I remember is a cold hand gripping my arm and a voice whispering in my ear, "Stay with us forever." We were found the next morning by a search party, huddled together and trembling with fear. None of us spoke about what happened that night, but we all carry the scars of that experience. The asylum remains abandoned, a dark reminder of the horrors that once took place within its walls. The Mirror's Curse. In an old mansion that had stood empty for decades, there was a room sealed off from the rest of the house. Legend had it that the room contained a cursed mirror. The mirror was said to show not the reflection of the person standing before it, but their darkest fears and secrets. I was a skeptic, always brushing off such stories as mere folklore. As an amateur paranormal investigator, I was thrilled when I got permission to explore the mansion. I wanted to debunk the myths and prove that there was no such thing as a cursed mirror. When I arrived, the mansion was as eerie as the tales described. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs hung from the ceilings like ghostly drapes. I found the sealed room and, with some effort, pried the door open. Inside, the air was frigid, and the only piece of furniture was an ornate, full-length mirror covered by a dusty cloth. I pulled off the cloth, and the mirror gleamed unnaturally, despite the gloom. Steeling myself, I stood before it. At first, it reflected my image perfectly, but then it changed. My reflection twisted into a grotesque version of myself, eyes hollow and mouth twisted in a silent scream. Suddenly, I was no longer in the room. I was in a dark, cold place filled with shadows and whispers. The shadows morphed into figures I recognized. My deceased parents, friends I had lost, and even strangers whose deaths I had witnessed during my investigations. They blamed me, accusing me of failing them, of causing their deaths. Panicked, I tried to look away, but my eyes were glued to the mirror. The figures grew closer, their voices rising to a deafening roar. I felt their cold, clammy hands on me, pulling me into the mirror. Just when I thought I would be lost forever, I managed to tear myself away. Gasping for breath, I stumbled out of the room and slammed the door shut behind me. The mirror had shown me my deepest fears, the guilt I carried for not being able to save those I loved. I never returned to the mansion, and I abandoned my pursuit of the paranormal. But the images from the mirror haunt me still, and I know that room remains, waiting for its next victim. The haunting of Blackwood Manor. Blackwood Manor stood atop a hill, overlooking a small village. It had a dark reputation, with tales of murder and madness plaguing its history. I was a journalist, sent to write a feature on the manor's haunted past. I didn't believe in ghosts, but I thought it would make a good story. The manor was imposing, with tall, narrow windows and ivy creeping up its stone walls. As I entered, the air was cold and musty. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I brushed it off. I was determined to spend the night and uncover the truth behind the legends. As I explored the manor, I found old portraits of the Blackwood family, their eyes seeming to follow me as I moved through the rooms. The atmosphere grew heavier as night fell, and I heard strange noises echoing through the empty halls. In the library, I discovered a hidden door behind a bookshelf. It led to a secret room filled with occult books and strange artifacts. Among them was a journal belonging to the last owner, Thomas Blackwood. He wrote about a dark presence that haunted the manor, driving him to madness. The journal detailed how Thomas had performed rituals to try and banish the entity, but it only grew stronger. His final entry was a desperate plea for help, saying that the entity had taken his family and he was next. As I read the last words, I felt a chill in the air. Suddenly, the room grew dark, and I heard whispers around me. The temperature dropped, and I could see my breath. I felt a presence behind me and turned to see a shadowy figure with glowing red eyes. It whispered my name, and I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. Terrified, I ran out of the room, but the manor seemed to shift around me. Doors led to different places, and I found myself trapped in a maze of corridors. The whispers grew louder, and I saw glimpses of the Blackwood family, their faces twisted in fear and pain. I finally stumbled into the main hall, and the front door was open. I ran out into the night, not stopping until I was far away from the manor. I never went back, and I never finished the story. But the haunting images of that night remain with me, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks within Blackwood Manor.